Why, hello, sailors and star naughts. I am Captain Garrett. Welcome to Swords and Starships. This is Captain's Cast. Sorry, just getting the captain's chair adjusted. Super important for posturepedic support. Hi, how are you? Let's take a look at the chat, shall we? We have Erigmar in the chat. Hello. Welcome in. Waffle? Why, hello there. It's been a while, Waffle. Pramod Parnami says hello from New Delhi, India. Why, hello. What time is it there? Man, I appreciate the commitment. Yes, hope everyone's having a great Sunday. Indeed. Hello, Tom. David in the chat. Howdy. Yes, we are in space. Do you like it? I'm working on the background. I told you, there are upgrades in progress. There are upgrades in progress. We are working on it. Okay, well, so I just finished The Mandalorian, episode 3. Is anybody enjoying The Mandalorian? Like, is anyone... I laughed out loud unintentionally, unironically at the wrong thing 3 times in this episode. So we have the Mandalorians. They are, spoiler alert, everything is spoiler. Well, no, not John Wick. We will not be spoiling John Wick because we got to talk about John Wick. We got to talk about Captain Picard. And we got to talk about Marvel drama because there is like huge Marvel drama. So all of that is coming up in the stack of stuff. But I just have to get this off my chest right off the top. Okay, this was exactly, this is a confession. Captain is going to make a confession to the crew. And that is that when I watched season 1 of The Mandalorian, I was still a little bit blue-pilled on Star Wars at that time. And I remember thinking, oh, this is righting the ship. And I thought every episode, as I put it, was like an unwrapped Christmas present. And I really did feel that way. I enjoyed the episodic, like, it was a return to form of Star Wars because it was just a Western in space. It was kind of a traveling adventurer. There was that cool, tantalizing element of like, he's got Baby Yoda, right? Baby Yoda was interesting to me because of what it might suggest about Yoda's history and I know he's not actually Yoda. My point is that we didn't know much about Yoda's species, and we knew he lived 900 years, and I thought, well, that's all kind of interesting. Fast forward to now. I watched this show. These Mandalorians are on this beach, okay? They're by this lake. This is their training ground. This is where they're rebuilding their grand, glorious society, right? Do you see any equipment anywhere? Do you see, like, even a tent for, like, shade from the sun? I mean, those metal helmets have got to get hot and... let's just say a little gamey, if you know what I mean. Really sealed in the flavor, those Mandalorian helmets and armor on that beach in the hot sun. Why is there nothing on this beach? It's desolate. There's no supplies. There's no food. And then where do they actually go? They go into this system of tunnels. There's a cave. There is one facility. There is one facility in this entire place, and that is the forge, where the blacksmith is blacksmithing and doing blacksmithing stuff. So naturally, our very first scene in season 3 is this crocodile, giant ship-sized crocodile, comes out, interrupts their big old ceremony. It was very impolite. Tries to eat the foundlings instead of the younglings. We have foundlings with the Mandalorians. Tries to eat them all. They fire everything they got with their little pew-pews. It does no damage whatsoever. It's like watching a health bar and a boss in a game. It's just barely going down. You're like, what are we going to do? But they're still at the same beach, same location. And what happens in episode 4? A pterodactyl comes down and grabs, I can't even believe this, grabs one of the foundlings, carries him off. And this, by the way, is the side quest for the whole episode. The side quest is, well, now we have to go get oh, we have to go back. We had to charge into the nest and save the poor foundling. And then Baby Yoda doing backflips in training. Oh my God. This is a disaster. This is their last card to play. So, chat, I have to know what you think about Mando. I, oh man, okay. Oh, thanks Waffle says, "Hey, great background." Uh Erigmar says it's so meh. I cannot believe it. It really is, but season episodes 1 through 3 are so meh. Episode 4 takes it to another level because you know, first of all, these Mandalorians are such idiots. Like all of them. They're not tactically intelligent. They don't really have much of a personality. They don't have much of a culture to be there. This is the way. What is the way exactly? We don't take off our helmet. Oh, they answered the question. How do they eat with their helmets off? Because clearly they're getting so memed on this that they had to actually have a line of dialogue that just flat out explains it. And Bo Katan asks at the fire, how do we eat? He's like, well, you don't. You just have to go off to somewhere private where you can take off your helmet and then you can eat. And I started laughing. So like, oh, good thing we finally got that out of the way. It's like the Emperor flopping over his chair in Revenge of the Sith. It's one of those things that feels so real, hyper real to the real world that it takes me out of it. I can't even think of this as like a fantasy world anymore. I'm like, it's weird. And then there's the scene where they have to sneak up on the pterodactyl's nest, right? And they can't use their rockets because it's going to scare the thing away. And Bo-Katan, uh, you know, they show her all this respect, right? She's sitting at the fire. For some reason, she's leading this mission. By the way, this is the Mandalorian. Din Djarin is no longer the title character. The title Mandalorian is Bo-Katan. I figured out what's going wrong with this season. This is the Bo-Katan show. That's what they always wanted, and now they're getting there. And so Bo-Katan is seated at the fire, and she's got the pride of place. Like, you have as the leader of the mission, you get to eat by the fire, and we'll all go off somewhere else and do something else. We'll find our own little spot to take off our helmets. So they clearly respect her, right? They respect her authority. They respect what she's doing. They're all in on her plan. But as soon as they're sneaking up on the nest, one of the Mandalorians is like, I'm going to go get him now. Like, no, stick to the plan. Stick to the plan. It's like, that's my son. No, I'm going. And I started laughing again because I'm like, it's not even like plausible. It's like, yeah, I understand he's emotional. It's his son, but it's just so basic, the dialogue. It's like, literally, we just need someone to screw this up so that we can have tension in the plot. And then oh my God. So then the next thing that happens is, it turns out there's three pterodactyl chicks that are in the nest. And it was like Land of the Lost, I swear. It was like a Land of the Lost episode. And these giant chicks are trying to eat the Mandalorian, right? And then the mama comes home, and the mama lands on the nest, and I swear to God, regurgitates, fully formed, the kid that she got in the beginning of the episode. Just, and she coughs up the kid. And I'm like, this can't be serious. And then the pterodactyl grabs one of the Mandalorians and flies off. And then we have to have a big, dumb, stupid action scene where they're chasing it on their rockets. And the coup de grace, the pièce de résistance, my dear sailors and star nuts, is they managed to wing it. They managed to hit it in the wing so it goes crashing into the lake, and it lets go of the other Mandalorian. There's so many Mandalorians. I mean, what do I even call them all? And guess how the pterodactyl dies if you haven't seen it. The giant crocodile comes out. Remember our old friend, the giant crocodile from episode 1? He comes out of the water and eats the pterodactyl. And I could just tell they're so proud of themselves. Like, for this episode, they're just, oh yeah, that's tying it all together at the end. It's like, why are they on this stupid spit of land with no equipment, no society, no civilization, no culture? And I just can't help but think there was such a missed opportunity with this show, because if they had just stopped with all the nonsense about, all these side characters that the Mando's always running into, if they had really just gone fully committed in this season with, let's just explore Mandalorian culture. Let's just have the Mandalorians be on a planet. They're rebuilding their civilization. The Empire's gone. They're rebuilding their cities. Bo-Katan, just let her be the leader, and let it be a story about building the lore of their culture. And instead of it being dumb catchphrases like "this is the way," and we do all of our ceremonies on a beach where multiple giant indestructible creatures will likely prey on us and our young, have it be a story about their culture and why is this the way. That could have been interesting. And all I see here is Baby Yoda merchandising and a lot of really dumb writing. Like, really, it's not even dumb is the wrong word for it. It's just unimaginative. It's like, no disrespect to any GMs in the audience, but this is like a bad Dungeon Master campaign. It's like, oh yes, you're on the beach and pterodactyl appears. Oh man. So let me catch up on the chat a little bit. So David says, gave up on Disney after Obi-Wan. Yeah, I gave up on it too. I'm only watching this for your benefit, my dear audience. But it is kind of, I will admit, I actually enjoyed episode 4 quite a bit because I laughed a lot. I'm still laughing. It spits out the kid, but it's not like covered in saliva. The kid's not covered in saliva or digested or in any way damaged whatsoever. Just, then there's the kid. I'm like, what? Was it just carrying it around in its throat just for hours and hours? That's not even how like a mother bird feeding her chicks even works. So it's like they didn't even get that right. Agamar says, I swear, Erigmar. That's probably a character that is unfamiliar to me. I can only imagine. Erigmar says, I swear, they are written to be the most underwhelming warriors in Star Wars ever. Oh, and this episode, they're worse than ever. I mean, literally the guy that screws everything up, right? He goes charging. Oh, it's my son. I'm going to go get him. He goes charging into the nest. He was the guy that only like 2 minutes ago was like totally deferential to Bo-Katan. It was like, oh yes, you're in charge of this mission. You get to sit by the fire, and then immediately disobeys her orders in the next scene in the most implausible way. It's really bad. Erigmar goes on to say, no outer security perimeter, no sensor screen, no sentries, no robots, no defensive armaments or anti-air emplacements. Pathetic. It's not even that. They don't have food. Like, they have nothing. There's no structures of any kind. There's not even any ships. There's not even a hangar. Like, what are they doing? Like, they have nothing on this beach. And then they have this dumb training scene where they're just kind of like milling around, and it looks like a soccer practice. It's just like, it looks like the most boring, uninteresting. I don't see anything about their culture that's interesting in that. David says, sounds like 4-year-old playing with action figures. Honestly, I think a 4-year-old playing with action figures is more creative than the writers of this show, because they would at least be imagining the Mandalorians getting in their spaceships and doing things like that. And in this show, that there's nothing. They're on a beach, just them. It's almost as if, you know what it's like? It's like they're NPCs, and when Mando is not there, they're just kind of in their pattern, going in their loops, and then when Mando shows up, they immediately say whatever the plot needs them to say for him to get the next fetch quest. It's really bad. Classic bait and switch. Happy for Katie, but damn. Yes, I love Katie Sackhoff. And but here's the thing. Katie's got nothing to do with it in this show. Unfortunately, her character is absolutely boring as hell. She doesn't really have a character. And if you know, I am a giant fan of the reimagined Battlestar Galactica series, and she was incredible in that show. Absolutely incredible. And her character had amazing complexity and nuance. I mean, she delivered a performance I think just few actors, but she just nailed it in so many different ways. And when you think of the character of Starbuck is so complex in that show, and then you take this character, there's literally a scene where she's sitting she's sitting next to the forge, and you know, basically this is her journey, right? Because she's suddenly getting all this Mandalorian stuff thrust upon her, but she doesn't like argue with it. She doesn't complain. She kind of goes on this bit. Oh, I'm a Mandalorian now. Okay. Oh, I'm gonna go save this kid now. Okay. She gets back like, oh, you're the victor. You saved the kid. Good for you. We're gonna forge a piece of armor for you. What would you like? And she's like, I don't know. What should I get? And they're like, oh, well, we could give you this symbol. That a lot of Mandalorians like this symbol. And she's like, oh, I would like that. This is a character? Like, this is. She doesn't have any thoughts about whether she actually wants to join the Mandalorians. She's not interested in them selling her on this idea at all. She's neither a reluctant hero nor an eager hero. She's sort of neither. She doesn't. She's just doing whatever the plot requires her to do. Erigmar says, this is the girl boss Sundare show, LOL. I'm Sundare. Oh, you got me on that one. There is no plot. Like, this is just their last desperate attempt to sell more toys. And it must be desperate because I can't imagine that they're selling all that many toys, period. I don't even know if they're selling that many Baby Yoda toys these days because their interest in this show is sort of falling off a cliff. I've even got a headline to prove it right here. Try this headline. I'll probably have to adjust my browser here. Hang on. There it is. IMDb user ratings provide another data point that viewers are tuning out of The Mandalorian. This from Bounding into Comics. Viewership for the third season of The Mandalorian appears to be trending in the wrong direction, based on a report from Samba TV. But IMDb user ratings also appear to back up that report. They basically say, yeah, we know this from the first episode. They really fell off a cliff. 1.6 million. The IMDb rating is see if I can find it here. Yeah, third episode received the worst rating of the show's entire run with a 7.2. This is pretty much the most. The premiere episode got a 7.5. I mean, I don't put like a huge amount of stock in it, but what that tells me is that the normies are getting tired of this. The people that, you know, just don't quite understand what's not working are starting to get tired of this. And they're not, and are they going to keep buying Yoda toys, Baby Yoda toys? I don't know. I don't think so. You know, the character's not even that cute anymore, if I can be honest. I liked Grogu a lot in the first season. I liked him still pretty much the same in the second, but I was getting bored with it. I was like, okay, you know, we need to wrap up this quest at some point, or we need to advance the story. I was getting tired of him being this kind of helpless baby all the time. And now I'm almost kind of losing the cuteness factor because I'm getting the feeling I'm being manipulated all the time now. Like every single time the camera throws to Grogu, he goes, eh, eh. And I'm just like, okay, stop it. Stop it. Stop trying to like bait me with cuteness. I want to, this isn't a character. This is becoming a puppet that makes baby sounds. And that's really irritating to me. That they have this shot where Baby Yoda is training. Now, look, okay, I get it. We like practical effects. CGI is being overused, but there's a fine line between using too many CGI effects and going a little too far the other direction and saying we are committed to using a puppet for this character no matter what. and whatever this character must do as a puppet, we will just make it happen. And it's literally like seeing a stuffed toy do backflips. There's a scene in which Mando puts Grogu in front of one of the other foundlings, one of the other Mandalorian kids, and they've got a spar. I'm like, first of all, can I just point out how absolutely ridiculous this looks just on the face of it? There's this tiny little stuffed animal at the feet of this kid, and this is supposed to be a sparring match. It's not possible to suspend that much disbelief, even for me. I'm pretty nerdy. I can watch old Star Trek episodes, and I don't care that the ship looks hokey. But this is straining it even for me, because then the kid, they're trying to do the thing that a lot of like adventure stories do, where the kind of underdog is underestimated and winds up proving himself in the arena. The problem is it doesn't work with a puppet baby character. It doesn't translate. It's like this would have to be an actual character for us to have this connection. And then secondly, it doesn't help when Baby Yoda does a flip over the kid and then does a backflip. It is the most... How do you even describe how absurd it looks? It literally does look like a kid that was playing with toys making this. So, yes. David says, sorry to put that burden on you. It is not a burden. As I said, I truly enjoyed episode 4, just not for the reasons they wanted me to enjoy it. I did not enjoy 1 through 3. That was torture. But episode 4 was good for some laughs. So I endorse watching episode 4, because you will not believe. You gotta see the Baby Yoda flip. You have got to see the mama pterodactyl regurgitate the kid. You've got to see the payoff with the crocodile eating it. They just keep coming. And then, and we're also treated to a flashback of the Order 66. Really? We're going back to that well again? I am so over seeing flashbacks of the Order 66 event, and it's not even an interesting take on it. You know, there's a certain amount of interest in seeing, what was it like for those that survived it? That was kind of cool in the very beginning. That idea was fine. Now they're just going back to that well over and over, and it's like, okay, that's no longer interesting. But worse, were we really curious how Baby Yoda escaped? I found myself never very curious about that. However, if I were inclined to be curious about that, this is not an interesting answer to the question. You would want... So he goes through this flashback, and I suppose this is a tepid attempt at giving Grogu some backstory and some characterization, and it did not work. And interestingly enough, the Jedi who rescues Grogu turns out to be played by our old friend Ahmed Best. Who is that? I didn't know until I looked him up and found out he's the guy who played Jar Jar Binks, and I'd totally forgotten all about that. I mean, honestly, I don't think I ever even knew who played Jar Jar Binks, because I just didn't care enough. I'm reading an article about Ahmed Best taking on this role of playing this Jedi that saves Grogu, and he's like, I went through such hell after being Jar Jar Binks that I had to really think about it. And I'm like, dude, you should stay as far from Disney Star Wars as possible. And I felt bad for the guy. I really do feel bad for actors that get like real world shit for their characters. Like, that is unfair to me. That's unless they're out there on social media being assholes. That's different. If you're out there on social media saying the fan, they're racist or whatever it is, well, then you deserve all the misery that you invite for being a jerk. But if you're just playing a character and the character is dumb as hell, you don't deserve actual hate for that. Like, the character does. But like Lena Headey, who played Cersei in Game of Thrones, she talked about how she would get all kinds of real world hate from people towards her, the actress who played, because she plays such an evil wench on Game of Thrones. I'm like, that is completely unfair. And more than that, it's ungrateful. I love Lena Headey's performance of Cersei. That's like one of the best parts of Game of Thrones, because she's so good at it. But to give her shit, same thing with Joffrey. What was that kid's name? I forget his name that played Joffrey. He got a lot of heat, and I hated Joffrey. I hated him, but I don't understand this thing where actors get hate for that. So I feel bad for Ahmed Best, but he did himself no favors in this episode because it's not even that it's like anything extremely dumb. It's just boring. Grogu was in the temple during Order 66, and one of the Jedi got him in a speeder and got him to safety. Wow. Great story. Felt like I was there. Erigmar says, I am the Black Knight. Okay, cool. Black Knight on A Drink with Crazy stream. Nice to see you. She was complaining about their cult for 2 seasons and is now readily doing their bit. Exactly. Talking about Erigmar saying that essentially Bo-Katan was complaining about the Mandalorians being dumb, and now she's just working with them, and she's fine with that. So, yeah. If you want me to move on from Mando, let me know, because I will. I have plenty more to go. I think I missed one in the chat. Tom says, what about the ridiculous Flava Flav medallion that they made Grogu over an already berserker chainmail? You know, everything about Grogu, everything is ridiculous in this show at this point. Absolutely absurd. I am unable to suspend any disbelief with this character anymore at all, which is saying something, because I loved this character in the very beginning. Now I realize I was completely misled. I was misdirected. And I fell for it. The captain fell for it. That was a misdirect. They didn't actually have any idea what his character was. He was just a baby that made cute sounds. And I fell for it. I admit. Roast me as you will. I deserve it. But now there's no, the bloom is off the rose. And I actually think that's true for normies too. But like, he gets this medallion. That whole scene is stupid because he's sitting there next to the forge, and we've got the blacksmith, and she's clearly, they think this show thinks that she is their most interesting character because she's the voice of wisdom. And she was kind of interesting in the beginning, but you know what it is? It's the mystery box thing. She's only interesting because we don't know anything about her, and she says kind of pseudo philosophical things all the time. And we're running out of patience with this kind of stuff. And so she's over there saying a bunch of pseudo-philosophical bullshit to Baby Yoda. He goes into his flashback, and then she's like, you, as a Mandalorian, must choose your sigil or whatever. And I'm like, the whole problem with that scene is that this is a puppet making baby noises. I can't take this seriously, and I need to... And the problem is, if they had just allowed this character to be with Luke, let him be off screen... Even if they had to move the story forward 5 years, what would have been the difference? The guy never takes off his helmet. You could have just said 5 years later, 10 years later. Mando's been on all these adventures. And you could even have the First Order, which, not that I'm wild about that. But if you're going with the First Order is on the rise, then 10 years in the future lets you advance the story closer to the disgusting prequels, if you must. Or sequels, I mean. And then you can have Grogu come back. He's a Jedi. He speaks. That's actually kind of what I always wanted from Grogu right from the beginning. I think the minute that bassinet thing opened up the first time and you see his little ears come out and you see his face, what I was already wanting at that exact moment was, I can't wait to learn more about this species and their culture and what they do. And that will tell me more about Yoda, in a sense, and that would be super interesting. And all they did was create a stuffed toy that's never going to be anything other than a baby. And that is incredibly boring. And that's the problem with, he picks the medallion, he gets rescued from the temple, he spars with the... who cares? Like, who cares? It's a puppet. I don't care. And this is not me bagging on sci-fi stuff. This is not me saying that puppets in films are stupid. This is me saying the way they're doing this, that's all it is to me. And it's not helpful. The Star Wars bar scene has more compelling characters in the original film, has more compelling characters than Grogu that are puppets. Turn off, tune out, drop Disney. Yes, we are gonna... I just had to get this off my chest, so we'll move on soon. I'm gonna catch up with the chat, and then we'll move on to our next topic. David said he's like a codependent girlfriend, meaning Mando with Bo-Katan. Possibly. But by the way, he has nothing to do anymore in his own show. Din Djarin has nothing to do in this show anymore. It's like he's been rescued twice. He's done almost nothing effective. Has he done one effective thing in these 4 episodes? Think about it. In the beginning, okay, he did take out the crocodile with a torpedo. Please don't remind me about that. He got captured twice and rescued twice. No, yeah, he got captured twice. He's almost been eaten multiple times. He's been ambushed almost every time he's been. He's exactly a duplicate of Pedro Pascal's other character from The Last of Us. He gets ambushed every 10 seconds and has to be rescued. He did get his Mando status back, but that's because he was rescued. And in this episode, he has to defer to Bo-Katan to lead the mission, so he hasn't done anything effective there. He tried to rebuild that robot in like episode 1, and he screwed that up, which turned out to be a bad idea. And then he killed all those pirates, but he left one alive, so now he's got pirates on his tail. Oh, by the way, what happened to the pirates? I thought that was going to be their setup. Whatever. Erigmar says Book of Boba Fett was atrocious too. And I hear Boba Fett is coming back into this show, which, yeah, Boba Fett was awful. That show was awful. David, he's like a... Okay, read that one. Erigmar says, it was one of their crappy mystery boxes, absolutely. David says, unless they're Brie Larson. Erigmar says, Brie is obnoxious. Brie needs to start microdosing or something. She looks unhappy 100% of the time. Yes. Poor Brie. I watched Avengers of Infinity War and Endgame last night, actually. My cousin and I. He hadn't seen the films in a while, and he was kind of thinking about watching them. I said, all right, we'll watch them. And yeah, I sort of consider that the end of the series, but the end of the MCU for me is Endgame. That's it. That was a good enough ending. I can live with it. I love that ending. But you know what's funny is I started noticing things I hadn't seen before this time around, and obviously Fat Thor and Smart Hulk and some of those things, and Captain Marvel wrecking Thanos' ship. Obviously all those things were problems that I kind of saw right from the beginning, but I saw them in a different light this time. I saw it as like, no, this was really the beginning of the end for the MCU. This was really the moment when they decided they were going to just emasculate and lampoon all of their best characters. Because why? Why would you do that? And I was listening to Open Bar last week, and Mahler had a great suggestion, which was, imagine if Hulk had used done the snap, and the damage that he got from the snap just made him enraged, and it rekindled his rage, and he went full-blown super duper rage Hulk. And there was apparently some like rewritten elements of the script where supposedly it was Hulk that was supposed to take out Thanos' ship. And I thought, damn, that would have been great. But they couldn't have that because they needed Captain Marvel to come in. And I see this moment when Captain Marvel comes in and takes out Thanos' ship, and I'm like, I don't understand how this character could be so powerful. She can wipe out this dreadnought, but then she doesn't have enough strength to like keep Thanos' hands open, and Thanos can like kick her ass. And it's like, but she just she went through your dreadnought like it's tissue paper. Are we really meant to believe that Thanos has never encountered beings that are on that level of power ever in all of his conquests? I sort of was able to assume that he's able to kind of really beat the crap out of 3 Avengers in that final act, because he has already fought extremely powerful beings throughout the galaxy, and the Avengers are just the most recent powerful beings that he's encountered. But that moment with Brie coming in kind of ruins all that. So I don't know. There's a lot more I was thinking about after watching those again. Erigmar says the first order of losers, LOL. So, yeah, you know who I liked in Force Awakens? I liked General Hux. When I first saw Force Awakens, I thought he was a cool character. In fact, he was the most interesting character to me in the First Order because number one, he was the most relatable because he was just a human. He's basically just a human Nazi, essentially, and that was relatable. But it's more accurate to say totalitarian because that word has been so misunderstood in recent years. It's like I don't even people use words now and they don't even know what they're talking about anymore. But essentially, he is a totalitarian general on an absolute megalomania power trip. And just that speech he gives when they fire off Starkiller Base was super cool. And I really enjoyed it. And I thought, this character has such potential to be a kind of new Grand Moff Tarkin. That was kind of what I was thinking, because I felt like Tarkin never got what he should have had in the original trilogy. Tarkin was a cool character, and he just went down with the Death Star. And wouldn't it have been interesting? Obviously, they wanted Vader to be the main character, and rightly so. But I was always curious about Tarkin and wanting to see more. And so Hux was a kind of spiritual successor to Grand Moff Tarkin. And I thought that could be really interesting. And then he turns out to be a complete idiot in Last of the Jedi. Wait, what did I say? The Last Jedi. I said Last of the Jedi. The Last Jedi. He turns out to be basically just a big meme within the film. And all of the First Order become complete idiots. So, no, did not work. Did not work for me. David says, did the sequel spawn any books or extended lore? No way. There's not enough there for that. Davis says, damn, like they hired the Lost in Space reboot writers. She's got help. Mahler should be an MCU showrunner. Mahler should be a showrunner on just about anything. Eric Marr says, Captain Obnoxious at David Glenn. They should let him make a Star Wars movie series, meaning Mahler. Yes, that would be awesome. That would be awesome. So compare this. Any Star Trek fans in the chat? So I've been watching Star Trek Picard season 3. Just finished episodes 5 and 6, Imposters and the Bounty. And I have to say, it is night and day. It's so funny how we got House of the Dragon, which was opposite Rings of Power. And we had these two fantasy shows that we could perfectly compare to one another. And I feel like Picard and Mandalorian are kind of the same thing because we have the Star Trek property and we have the Star Wars property. And in the case of Star Trek Picard Season 3, we have this fluke where it's actually honoring the lore of Star Trek, and it's actually rebuilding these characters in this brilliant way. And one of the things I really am enjoying about Picard is that the younger generation of characters they're likable, they're interesting, they're competent, and you can believe that they belong on the ship, but they don't step on the older generation. There's this give and take between them and the older generation that is perfect because they're younger, they're more willing to take risks, they're a little more daring, they're a little more headstrong, but the older generation is more competent and more experienced and a little wiser. And there's a recognition on both sides of those strengths and weaknesses. The older generation kind of is reminded of how they used to be by the younger crew and start to kind of change their mind about some things. Like, yeah, we gotta do this, right? And the younger generation, they run off half cocked and then they get in over their head and they call in, the older guns, right? And I like that. I think that is as it should be. And it's making me really enjoy this show so much more. And Star Fury 0001 says, not a fluke. It is the Metalis effect. Ooh, I like that. Not only does that sound Star Trekian, the Metalis effect, Terry Metalis being the de facto showrunner of this season, but might we coin the Metalis maneuver? The Metalis maneuver, which is when two shithead loser hack writers like Kurtzman and Akiva Goldsman fuck off to do other crap that nobody's going to watch. The Metalis maneuver is to, kind of slide in and write a super epic, awesome show that just delivers as much fan service as possible in every single episode. There is a scene, and I will not spoil this. I won't spoil this scene because it's just so beautiful, and I want you to experience it if you haven't. But they go to the Starfleet Museum. And as you might imagine, there are things in the Starfleet Museum that are connected to Star Trek history and lore. And there's just this moment where they're looking at some of these things, and it's just beautiful. It is just absolutely beautiful. And it's almost as if right there is this kind of love letter to Star Trek, because we know this is the last time that we're going to have someone who cares about it writing it. And I wish I could believe that this might turn things around, but it won't, because, on one level, Kurtzman and Goldsman, they are what they are. They're creatures of their industry. They're corporate idiots that are there to make money and play the political game. They don't, you either love the artistic craft of something or you don't, or you're working on something that just isn't what interests you, And Starfury says, the crew is respectful of their senior commanders, which is a first for Kurtzman Trek. Yeah, there's this magnificent scene. Again, spoiler alert for episodes 5 and 6. There is this magnificent scene. We get Geordi LaForge. He comes back in this episode, and he's great. And, I have so many points to make about LaForge. But one thing I will say is he is portrayed as a successful father, a good father, who has made mistakes. That's the beauty of it. He's still flawed, and he still is kind of stubborn and set in his ways, but it's clear that he has done a good job as a father, and his children acknowledge that. Number 2, he's a successful leader. He's a Commodore running this space station. He's clearly seasoned and competent and confident in what he does, and he's clearly very meticulous. By comparison to like Riker and the others, he's got that engineering level of meticulousness about how he does things. And finally, he's just a successful man. He's just a man who is successful. And you don't get that in modern storytelling anymore. People like Kurtzman are not capable of writing that. Number one, because they are not successful. And I'm not talking about money. I'm sure they have plenty of money. They're not successful. And they can't identify. They can't feel represented by successful characters. So for them to portray a character that is successful in life, they don't understand how to do that. And Metalis clearly does. And there's a great moment. Sydney LaForge is trying to tell Sydney, I want you off this mission. I want you off this ship. I don't want you in danger. And she pushes back. And if this had been Kurtzman Trek, it would have been girl boss is giving her old, out of touch, patriarchal father the business. And she is teaching him a lesson because he needs to step aside. We need to kill the past if we have to, because it's time for us younger people who understand how the world should work. And of course, he would have been a deadbeat dad if this had been in Kurtzman's hand. It would have been all about how he had failed in all these different ways, and he was estranged from at least one of his daughters. He would have been estranged from it. By the way, his own LeVar Burton's actual daughter plays Alondra, one of his daughters on this episode, which was awesome. And they would have, at least one of them would have been estranged, if not both of them. And Sydney certainly would have been. Instead, we get a scene in which Sydney absolutely stands her ground and says, this isn't like you. If you were in my place, you would have stood up for what was right. And he pushes back and says, you don't understand what it's like knowing you're out there when you're in danger, referring specifically to the event she had just been through. And there's this push and this pull, and she ultimately is kind of winning the argument because she's pointing out that, hey, you're the one that taught me that this is how we do things. And she basically just says, I'm an adult, this is my career, and it's my choice, not yours. And the difference with that and the sort of girl boss lecture that we get in other shows is that she actually has a point. She's pointing out that he is overstepping and that he is inappropriately trying to protect her when she is an adult that has career choices of her own. But even within that, she's also acknowledging that she's acting on what he taught her as a child, which is acknowledging that he was a good father who taught her good lessons. And what she's really saying is, you're betraying your own principles. This is not you. And that ultimately convinces Geordi to kind of help eventually. And I really like that. So we get that moment and then there's a moment where like he's using a tool and she says, oh, Dad, that's the wrong tool. You want this tool. And it shows that she's kind of intelligent. And normally that would be kind of a red flag because you're like, oh, of course, she's smarter. She's better at everything, right? But it's not that at all, because there's another moment in the show where she's trying to install a cloaking device and it's going very badly. And even though she's pretty talented, she's like, I can't figure this out. And then you hear Geordi LaForge come in. He's like, but I can. And he immediately takes command and fixes it in beautiful fashion. And that's the difference. There's balance. There's push and pull. There's two people arguing and both have points. Both are right. And that's the difference and that's why I'm totally okay with her calling her dad out on the carpet, because in that situation, the audience is not being assumed to take one side or the other. The audience is invited to simply listen to both sides. And you understand Geordi's perspective in that he somewhat selfishly wants to protect his family from harm. It's like, that's what he wants to do. But she kind of reminds him conversely that, when you were younger, you took a lot of risks and you weren't wrong to do it. So, yes, the Metalis effect, the Metalis maneuver. Erigmar says, I plan on watching the new season after I finish my new novella. Oh, awesome. If you're interested in sharing details about your novella, drop it in the chat. I'm interested to hear. How close are you to finishing that? Yeah. Is your novella sci-fi? I suspect, if you're anything like me, when I'm writing a book, I avoid watching things that are too close to what I'm writing because I kind of live in fear of, being derivative. So I don't want to take that risk. When I was writing my books, Blood and Oak, the epic high seas sword and sails adventures, the link is in the description if you're curious. I would not watch the show Black Sails because it was too close to what I was writing. But then after I'd finished it, I watched Black Sails, and oh my God, that is a great series. If you have not seen Black Sails, it's excellent. It's essentially a prequel to Treasure Island, and it's done brilliantly, and it's historically fairly authentic. I mean, obviously, they take a lot of liberties, but generally speaking, they portray a lot of the Pirates of the Caribbean culture pretty accurately. There's definitely a lot of liberties with the actual historical events, but there's a lot of actual pirates that were real people in that show. And, if you want the non-Disney version of what the Pirates of the Caribbean were really like, that show is much closer. And obviously, because they're not walking skeletons, but you get my point. Like, if you want to see the real Pirates of the Caribbean, go watch Black Sails. Oh, what a show. I love that show. Maybe I'll do like a retro review on that. Starfury says, you can tell Metalis loves Star Trek. Don't you love competent, loving fathers who are reflected by their daughters? She did teach him a lesson, one that he had taught her. Yeah, exactly. Even as she's telling him he's wrong, it's from the perspective of, this is what you taught me, and I admire you for that. And this is not to say that I'm against characters in a show ever not liking their parents. My point is, it's nice to see. Well, here's the thing. Number one, we're dealing with legacy characters we already know. So that's number one. We already know that these are characters of high moral character because we saw them in Star Trek The Next Generation. But number two, this is the Federation. This is the future in which humanity is more enlightened. I should expect most parents we meet to be loving and successful parents. That should be my expectation as a viewer. It should be rare in this world that we're encountering deadbeat parents. And so this is another sign that Metalis understands Star Trek. It is necessary to show these characters being successful. I mean, in a way, this is the anti-Jake Skywalker effect, right? What was so rotten about what they did to Han Solo and Luke Skywalker in the sequels? What was so rotten about it was that they implied that Han Solo was a bad father who failed. He was a bad husband who just screwed off to go do what he was going to do, and he went right back to his old habits from before the rebellion of being a no-good deadbeat smuggler. And admittedly, I didn't quite pick that up the first time I saw Force Awakens, as I was caught up in all the excitement. I let them slide on way too much. But in retrospect, I understand that that's essentially what they did. They returned him to what he was before the rebellion, which is absurd. He wasn't the same man who joined he joined the rebellion. So they're just incapable. Writers with this mindset, they're just incapable of writing a successful father. Now, I think you could have written it so that he was a successful father and a loving husband, and him and Leia were still together, but their son went to the dark side. And that could have been done well. It could have been a really good story. But then Rian Johnson happened, and that was the end of that. Erigmar says, Kurtzman and the likes of him would be remembered for what they are, failures. Like I wrote in Star Shatter's Morale Officer Handbook, nothing built by weaklings lasts. I could see you definitely have more of a Starship Troopers kind of mythos going on there. I like it. I'm about 30% and plan on finishing Velen and the Bunker of Death. Ooh, that's a good title. This summer. Probably will take another 2 months. By the way, I hope you like the Rifles song. Yes, indeed, if you'll pardon me for just 1 second. My dear sailors and starnauts. There it is right there. See if we can get a good shot. Velen, the Rifles song. This is by our friend in the chat, Erigmar. Also is known as Black Knight. There you go. So check this out on Amazon. That's great cover art, by the way. May I say, sir? That is excellent cover art. And thank you for bringing back busty green women to sci-fi. You don't know how that warms my heart. There are far too few busty green women in sci-fi. Would you agree? I would agree. The captain has pronounced judgment. There is too few. Starfury says, the nihilistic makers of most IPs. By the way, what I'll do is I'll read through this, and when I get through it, I'll do an Iron Age review. So, no pressure. Starfury says the nihilistic makers of most IPs are incapable of showing original characters as incompetent in all aspects of life. I think you mean competent, perhaps. Because I think if that's what you were saying, I totally agree. The nihilistic makers of most IPs are incapable of showing original characters as competent in all aspects of life. I think that's what you were saying. Correct me if I'm wrong. But they are, and this is absolutely, I think sometimes we're just a bit hard on our woke friends. Sometimes I think that what it is they too feel the pressure of a modern society that has abandoned kind of humanity in some ways. And some of them are not, they know something is wrong, but they can't put their finger on it. And I don't want to get too far in the weeds here, but I just think we live in a society where we have spent so many years being told that we need medications for everything. We need, someone who goes to work every day at a 9-to-5 job in a cubicle and feels depressed, goes to their therapist, and the therapist says, oh, you're going through depression. Here are the symptoms, and here are your drugs to medicate your depression. But could it also be that there's something about going to a cubicle every day And I'm not saying that, we should abandon all technology and, go back to living on the savannah. I'm just saying maybe there's other reasons why something is not right. And I think that Twitter and TikTok and all these things are exposing that we are becoming increasingly isolated. And people that are looking for an answer to that and looking for a solution, who are in pain, tend to react in bad ways, I would say, online, some of them. And so my point is, some of that nihilism that is seeping into storytelling is partly a consequence of, I think, modern civilization not helping people find better ways of negotiating this. I mean, figuring out. Look, I'm kind of an old soul. I sometimes think the world is far too loud, far too noisy. There's all these. Think about how many motors and engines and, just loud, just beep, 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 and just all the sounds you hear on a daily basis. You never would have heard that 400 years ago. For most of human history, you never would have heard sounds like that 200 years ago. And I think that's why I enjoy historical fiction. I love writing story. Now, I'm not saying that back in the ancient times everything was rosy and beautiful. Believe me, if you walked in the streets of ancient Rome, the smell would probably kill you. I mean, you wouldn't even be able to imagine how bad it smelled in the streets of Rome in, like, say, 200 AD. So I am not painting a overly rosy picture of the past. All I am saying is we have new challenges, and it's causing pain in our civilization, and I think we're using the wrong things to fix it. We're using the wrong things. We're using too much Adderall. We're using too much antidepressants. I'm not saying those things don't have their place. I'm just saying we're using too much. And we're not considering that maybe we're spiritually disconnected. Maybe there's something we need in our core that we're not getting, and we need to think about that. And our woke friends are writing stories that posit that the reason for all this pain and suffering is because of whatever enemy has to be stopped, whatever injustice is being committed, and that is their answer for it. Or their answer is, if the wrong people can just be silenced, etc. But in terms of the storytelling, it's that they see the world as, it's just a cynical view. It's a cynical view of the world. And I tend to think maybe it's growing pains. If we could just keep from inventing Skynet for long enough, or, blowing ourselves up, we might just figure it out. That's my very optimistic projection, and quite the stream of consciousness rant. We don't need Ergmar says, also known as Black Knight, says, we don't need meds for everything, but go be one with nature and spend some time with family and friends. Embrace the small but positive things in life. The more you do that, the better your life will be, yours and those you care for. Yes, that is well said. Has anyone seen John Wick 4? Let's talk about John Wick 4, shall we? Oh, man. That is 3 hours of absolute mayhem, and I enjoyed every minute of it. Pulling up a couple of headlines for you that will aid us in our exploration. John Wick box office. Try this headline. Box office. John Wick Chapter 4 crushes franchise record with $73.5 million opening weekend. I have a feeling about this movie. I think this is going to keep going. I think it is going to be, I don't know if it's going to be another Top Gun Maverick where it's just going to dominate for week after week after week. But I think it's going to do very well. I don't think it's going to see that fall off a cliff. And here's the thing. This movie had a $100 million budget. Think about the absolute truckloads of money that Disney and Warner Brothers are spending on these failed superheroes. You've got Shazam, Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania, losing them money. You've got Every single superhero movie that Marvel has come out with the exception of Spider-Man No Way Home, has been either well below what they wanted or an outright failure. Every single one of them has been receiving just absolute negative reviews from the fans. And then you take a movie like John Wick, which is able to deliver these incredible action sequences, but on a budget of $100 million. And then it's doing way better than these superhero films in general. John Wick Chapter 4 knocked down the box office competition, collecting a remarkable $73.5 million in its opening weekend. The original John Wick did $14 million in 2014. Its sequel, Chapter 2, $30 million. And the third film which was the previous series high, $56 million in 2019. So think about that. First film did $14 million. This film is doing $73. And here is why this movie is doing $73 million, because it's freaking badass. It is. There are no less than 6 action sequences in this film that are some of the coolest, most inventive action sequences I've ever seen. There is, no spoilers. I won't spoil any of the plot details, but I may spoil I'm not gonna. I may hint at like what some of the action sequences contain, but just to give you one example, there is one action sequence where the camera is looking down and John Wick is going room to room with just a super awesome weapon. And it is one of the coolest things I've ever seen. It's a bit like a video game, to be honest, in this scene, but it still worked because it was showing the way that John Wick uses his tactics that we've seen, dozens of times at this point, but it was showing it from a different perspective. And that was clever because there's only so many ways you can show John Wick going, wall to wall and just, taking out every goon that he encounters. This was a pretty cool way of putting a new spin on it, but it was just awesome. And then you have this sequence in France with the Arc de Triomphe, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, involving a fight amidst, speeding cars that is it's bananas. It's absolutely bonkers. So I won't tell you too much. I want everything to be kind of a surprise as you go through this film when you see it. But it's great fun. If I have one kind of critique of the film, the first act, I thought I was getting a little nervous because in the first act, it felt like they were building up all these other characters. So there's this character Nobody, who is this tracker who is following John Wick and kind of almost like a vulture, waiting for the bill to get high enough where the bounty to get high enough where it's worth killing him. And I thought that's a super cool idea. And then you've got this other character, Kane, who's on his trail, and he's played by Donnie Yen, and he's a blind man, but he is basically a match for John Wick. And the subtle implication is that if he had his eyesight, it'd be over for John. And I kind of like that. I really dig it. And his martial arts, oh my God. If you don't remember, he played the blind man in Star Wars Rogue One. The Force is with me. I am one with the Force. The Force is one with me. This guy's physicality is unbelievable. So then you have him, and then you also have Akira, who is the concierge of the Osaka Continental, which is amazing. I love that I love getting to see every different Continental. That is such a fun element of these. But what was making me nervous was much of the beginning of the film is just setting up all these characters, and there's very little John. You get John Wick in some of the beginning, but a lot of the first action sequences were more around John and were not him taking the lead. And I was becoming worried that they've created a vehicle where we're really just bringing in newer, more interesting characters because we don't have faith in our principal character anymore. But then as the film progresses, it's almost as if they kind of start with the circle kind of out here, and then slowly but surely the plot and the action just continues to center until it is laser focused on John Wick in this epic Act 3, just insane string of action sequences. And what makes it so good is that those other characters are all interconnected with what Wick is doing. They're interconnected with everything that John needs to accomplish and everything that's in his way. And there are so many cool payoffs, and each of these other characters is super interesting in their own right and has a unique relationship with John Wick. And so by the end of it, oh, it is absolutely John Wick's movie. But you kind of needed all that setup in the beginning to get all the payoffs that you get at the end, and they are sweet, epic payoffs. So I would say if it feels a little slow in the first act, stick with it because you will be rewarded. It's worth it. And then in the final act, the action just doesn't stop. It just goes and goes, and it's incredibly fun to watch. I went to see the movie with a member of my family who is not good with long movies, and she doesn't like it when it's super long. She didn't even realize it was 3 hours. We got out of the theater. She said, "Wait, that was a 3 hour movie." I didn't even realize it. So it moves at a brisk pace. And this movie, it's just fun. It's just and that's why it's gonna have legs. Where's my chat? I minimized my chat. You can never do that. Star Fury says, cool movie. Oh, wait, I missed a couple. Hang on. Erigmar says, well, I read that one. Erigmar says, we might just invent Wholesome Net. Wholesome Net? No, not on this channel. Star Fury says, cool movie. Erigmar says, I can't wait to watch it. He is the ultimate modern action character. He really is. And it's, the thing that surprised me about it was the storyline in the first film is the most emotional in the series. And it's kind of why I felt the second and third one they were fun. They were good. I liked the second and third one, but they seemed lacking in kind of an emotional core. And I actually feel like this fourth one brought it back a little, but in ways you wouldn't expect. And it has a lot to do with the character work they do with John and all the other characters and how they interconnect creates an emotional core that this film has. And the Marquis, who is the villain, played by Bill Skarsgård, is excellent in this movie. He's just, and I remember in one of our previous streams, one of you were asking me, is there a memorable character, a memorable villain in the John Wick series? And I had to admit, the villains in John Wick are not exactly like James Bond villains that are super memorable or interesting. This one is. This one I think totally is. And I will be thinking about the Marquis for, probably years to come. That Skarsgård is one hell of an actor, let me tell you. He's so charismatic. He can just absolutely hold the attention on him every second he's in it. And of course, he's playing opposite Ian McShane in a lot of these scenes, and Ian McShane is just a boss. David says, I plan on seeing John Wick 4. Plan on seeing it twice. See it in IMAX if you can. It's just cool. And you know what's so cool about it is, there's none of this CGI overload that we're getting with all these Marvel movies. It's like it's a return to most of what is special effects in this story is really the physicality and the martial arts. The physicality, the martial arts, the choreography, and that's all human. That's all human created. And on that subject, try this headline. From Fandom Wire, Keanu Reeves is a beast. Fans take a bow after realizing Reeves did 90% of all John Wick 4 stunts. Can I just tell you something? This surprised me. When I came across this headline, I actually did not see. I would have guessed that Keanu did like 75% or maybe 60%. That would have been my guess because, and here's why. No disrespect to Keanu Reeves because he's absolutely excellent. I just kind of was concerned maybe he's getting a little older, a little slow. I mean, he's been doing these movies since what? 2014, so we're almost 9 years in. I mean, just biology is what it is. Maybe he's slowing down a little. He's not, and he's up against, Donnie Yen is so just kinetic. Every move, that guy his physicality is unbelievable. And then you've got, I forget the name of the actor, Hiroyuki Sonata, I think. Hiroyuki or Hiroyuku, I forget. Sonata. But he plays one of the kind of samurai assassins at the Osaka. He's the owner of the Osaka Hotel. And he's got this incredible martial arts physicality. And so when you've got Keanu with all these other just incredibly talented people, sometimes is it possible that he's looking just a touch slow, right? And so my thought was they probably would want to have more of the stunts, some of the stunts at least, done with other actors. No. Keanu did 90% of all of his stunts. I'm trying to find, let's see, where is the tweet? So this is from the Discussing Film Twitter account. Keanu Reeves did 90% of his own stunts for John Wick 4. Source was ET Online. So that would be, yeah, that would be this article. So we'll skip that. So that source is ET Online. And as one fan put it, I just finished watching it, and I believe these reports. Keanu Reeves is a beast in part 4. Yeah, I totally agree. He's like, I mean, does the man stop for, this is the thing, if you've ever seen any of the training that he does behind the scenes, it's really impressive. He is, and I've heard he has an amazing work ethic. I've heard that like he just won't quit, and he's a super nice guy to work with on set by all accounts. But he is in there learning these martial arts, these jujitsu moves. And it's kind of funny to watch the behind the scenes when he's doing all the gunfighting, because they do put in all the actual effects of the guns firing and everything, all that's put in post, obviously. So you kind of just see him moving through a room and no sound coming out of the gun. But even that, it's just amazing to have the amount of choreography you need to do all those gun fu fight scenes. It's incredible. And he puts in all that effort, and it's work ethic. That's what these films are. These films are successful because of work ethic. These actors care about what they're doing, and they put in the work themselves. And this is the thing. How can superhero movies compete with this? Superhero movies need to start getting disciplined with their budgets if they have any hope. You know, that's why Joker was so brilliant with DC, because it was a lower budget film that zoomed in and did a character study on the Joker, and look at how much money that made, because they prioritize quality. You do not need the stupid quantum realm with all these swirling clouds and all these CGI monsters and all this garbage. You don't need it. What you need is a character with Daredevil. The scene in Marvel's Netflix Daredevil, where he goes through that hallway and that big long take and he fights all those guys, that is worth 10 times. All the CGI that you can stuff in a Quantumania is worth nothing compared to that one hallway scene with Daredevil. And that's all choreography. That's all cinematography. That's all you need to make good, compelling stories. And that's why John Wick is crushing it. Just crushing it. And I'm behind on the chat because I can't stop talking about it. Erigmar says, we will go to the movies for the first time in years just to watch John Wick. Shazam? No, we are calling it Felazam. You know, to be fair to Shazam, I never watched the first one either. I couldn't. It's a kid's movie. I'm just not into it. No disrespect to anyone who likes it. It ain't my thing, okay? The growth of John's character is steady and quite satisfying, too. It is. And I think, you know, Gary on Friday Night Tights made this point that, like, you know, in John Wick 1, it's an assassin hitman story, and it's super cool, and it's a revenge tale. After that point, it's a fantasy story, and I pretty much agree with that. It's pretty much become a fantasy story. There is one thing that bugs the hell out of me, though. I will say this. How many times can any man get hit by a car in the legs before he's, you know, not able to fight very effectively? I mean, this is the thing. John Wick gets hit by a car like 4 times in one scene. Then he dives out of a 4th-story window, lands on a van, and then in the street. And that's not even the first time he, like, falls from a great distance. And I'm like, this is the thing I like about John Wick is that he kind of is almost a critique of old school action heroes where the bad guys never hit, they always miss, and they could just, their chain gun, blah, 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 it's just the old Stallone action, the old Schwarzenegger Commando movie where he's just one man, mowing down all these enemies. I kind of like with John Wick, the reason he's effective is because of his skill and his focus, his commitment to his task, and he plans everything. And so he's not unkillable. He's not indestructible. He has to be smart or he will get killed. And that's why he's so impressive. So when you have a moment where he gets hit by a car and he just gets back up, it kind of ruins it. It kind of ruins it for me a little bit. But it's a small, you're kind of in for a penny, in for a pound. So I wish they would either dial it back on the getting hit by cars and falling off roofs and being fine, or make it have more of an accurate cost in the story, or at least explain that he has some kind of technique that allows him to survive these things. Like I never have a problem with John Wick being superhuman when there's kind of a plausible reason for it. Like for example, they've got the Kevlar coats, so they're always using that to block bullets. Obviously, that's as fantastical a technology as I can imagine, but I'm okay with it because in this world, that's how that works, right? If you have the coat, you can block the bullets with it. Fine. And hurts like hell. They say that in the second film. It'll hurt like hell, but it'll stop the bullet. And so it even makes him a little more badass because that every time he gets hit, it hurts, but he's still fighting. I can live with that. So just give me something like that to let me understand how he's able to get hit by a car. Like he has some kind of kung fu technique that he uses to jump at the right moment. I don't care. Just give me a line of dialogue. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. Star Fury says, agreed. Nobody's character and motivations are unclear. I don't know that I think it's that he was unclear. Nobody was great because to me, what I picked up on is, and I won't get into spoilers, but just in the very beginning when he's first introduced, he's got this journal and it's got all these dollar amounts for all these hit jobs and all this research he's been doing. And what I gathered from that is that he is absolutely, he steals other people's kills. That's what he does. He goes around looking for the highest ticket jobs. He lets all the other assassins get really close and do a lot of the work for him. And then right at the last moment, he steals the kill and he gets the big payday. And that's what he's trying to do with John Wick. And by the way, this is another cool thing about this movie. Every single one of these characters has their own fighting style, their own tactics, their own way of doing things. That is, I can't even tell you how creative that is. I can't even believe the amount of creativity that goes into this movie because to be able to give, look, at the end of the day, these are all hitmen. They're all the same archetype. Every single character in this movie is the same character archetype. They are assassins that live in this shadow world. They live by this code of honor, and they all use roughly the same technology. So how much variety can you really have in their tactics? And yet, he has almost kind of like a kickboxing sort of fighting style. He's got a kind of blunt force trauma way of punching guys that's super cool. He's got a dog that's helping him. But then you've got Kane, who's blind, and he uses little, doorbell alarms to know where people are, where they are in the room so he can shoot in their direction. He uses his cane the way a blind man uses his cane, right? To actually find where he is in the environment, and you can see him working it out in his head. Okay, where are they? And he's listening for okay, if I hear someone coming that way, that's what that means. And then you've got the samurai, the Osaka Continental hitmen that are all using samurai tactics, which is super cool. So every single character in this has their own unique style, their own unique cultural way of approaching how they do things in this world. That is so cool. And I will say, probably John Wick 3, because of Halle Berry sort of almost duplicating John Wick's style, that is the one time that I felt that was unoriginal because I liked her dogs, but she herself was just a John Wick copy. And that was a little bit boring. So they really fixed that in this fourth one. Every single assassin is a little different than John, and I enjoy that. And it allows John to be the star. Because if one person does exactly what John does, but better, then he's not the star anymore. Eric Mar says, they are following the same formula I adopted for my Star Shatter series. Can't go wrong with that. David says, so they didn't bring in an 8-year-old girl who inherently knows all martial arts, weapons, tech, and can show 300-pound men, shove 300-pound men around to replace him? Absolutely not. And this is what I will say. So there's one character. Let me find her for you real quick. Akira. So this character, played by Rina Sawayama, I think it is. Yeah. So she is the concierge. No, I'm not subscribing to Collider. Give me a break. Let's go to good old-fashioned image search. Here we go. There she is. Make sure I got a good view in my... Oh, sorry. Switched my browser. My bad. There we go. So yeah, this character she's the concierge, and she's also the daughter of Sanada's character, who's he's the samurai owner of the Osaka hotel. And you would think she would be a total girl boss, right? You would think that she's going to totally steal the show. She's going to be thrown around, accommodating stuntmen, all this stuff. And it's quite the opposite. Like, her way of fighting is she uses speed and agility and athletics to kind of outmaneuver the larger men. She is not able to throw them, but she is able to slip under their blows. She's able to climb up on them. She's able to use knives to kind of stab at their weak points. And she kind of like mosquitoes to death this one guy with just 1,000 cuts, and it's freaking brutal. It's so good. And it does not steal the show from these, because there's actually sumo assassins in this one, and they're freaking awesome. And the sumo assassins have their own style of doing things. And you would think that like they'd be kind of big targets, and of course they are, but they're not they're not stupid in how they fight. So the film is very aware that there are physics involved in each character's abilities. Each character has different physics thresholds of the things they can do, except for John. He can fall from buildings and be fine. But everyone else, there's also a guy in this. Oh, the poker scene. I love the poker scene. When you get to the poker scene, just sit back and just let this experience happen. Don't question it. Because I was questioning it. At first, I'm like, what is the point of this scene? I don't understand what the point of this is. But then I kind of just said, screw it. I'll just go with it. And I'm glad I did, because it was... You know what? It's one of those weird things where you just know that somebody writing this film had an idea for a scene and it was kind of off the wall and they just went for it. And those are, in my view, the kinds of things that make films memorable. The things that make films memorable are very unconventional scenes. Give you an example. I recently saw the film Pearl, which is a horror movie. It's a prequel to the film X. If there's any film threaders in the chat, Chris Gore reviewed it on Film Threat. And there is this scene in which she just is doing this monologue for like 10 minutes. And Chris Gore quite accurately said it was awesome. And I watched it recently, and it is awesome. It's unbelievable. It defies all logic in how you would write a scene. And yet, it is very much Mia Goth's performance also. It's well written, it's the writing, but it's also her performance is so good. She has all this emotion and expressiveness while she's saying it. So if you like horror, if you haven't seen Pearl, it's excellent. It's an excellent film. I'm going to do a review on it. And it's so unconventional, but it's so memorable. And so this poker scene in John Wick 4 is kind of like that for me. It's odd, but in a good way. It's very odd. And yet you're with it. You're just like, okay. And of course, I'm a poker guy. So, by the way, if I may offer one very, very, very teeny tiny spoiler, the game they're playing in this poker game is 5-card draw. And I loved that. You know why? Because we went through that period of 20 years where Texas Hold'em was the only poker game that existed for all time. And it was the only game anyone could talk about. And I love Texas Hold'em. I really do. But there are other games in poker. And so I liked that he wasn't saying Texas Hold'em. Okay. There is also another reason why it's 5-card draw, but It's neither here nor there. So yeah, no implausible girl bosses in this film. Well, at least that are no more implausible than John Wick himself. Let's just say that. So, Star Fury, the end scene. Be careful that I read this. Made me choke up a bit, especially the inscription. Yes, it was very good, and yeah, I won't say any more. Bitfur Dah. Let me see if I can pronounce this. You got to understand, my chat is like the text is small, so sometimes I have trouble. Oh, I can't see. The text is too small. I need my bifocals. Bifer Dahabit says, I appreciate you. I never miss a video. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And I'm always open to feedback. If there's things that you want to see more of, let me know. If there's, one of the pieces of feedback I got was that my background was lacking, and I knew that. And so I upgraded the background. So let me know what you think. I'm kind of digging it. I kind of thought, I didn't know if it would work out, but I think I'm liking it. So, Erigmar says, Keanu is immortal, LOL. Yeah, I will say, it's my one little critique of John Wick. I have a couple little critiques. And the whole reason I liked that first movie, not the whole reason, but the whole reason I liked the premise was that John Wick was a different kind of action hero. He wasn't quite like Jason Bourne, where it's this hyper-realistic kind of super spy character. Neither was he this kind of outlandish 80s action hero. He was this he was outlandish, but he was plausible in that he was the very best. He was the very best of anyone. He was the best hitman in the world. That's basically the concept. What would the very best hitman in the world look like? The hitman that other hitmen are afraid of, right? That's the concept. And they established that through his tactics. That's what made it so cool to me. So when they ignore the truly implausible things like falling from a building, that bothers me, because the whole reason I liked John Wick is that he was limited in what he could physically do. And so it is a bit of a critique, but maybe they'll fix that in a future films. I would hope they take a look at that, because they did kind of improve a lot of things in this fourth one that were lacking in the third one. So Star Fury says, and Grace Randolph made this rotten. What a hack. Are you talking about John? She thought John Wick 4 was rotten? I mean, look, there's no accounting for taste, right? I would suspect someone who finds Disney Star Wars entertaining and is just combing through it for all the fun Easter eggs. Yeah, you're probably not going to like John Wick. You probably really enjoy the message and all the things that Star Wars is serving up and Marvel is serving up to you, and you probably enjoy She-Hulk and all the. You really probably love this D&D movie where Chris Pine is just, he is the face of all men, just being emasculated and lampooned the whole movie. You probably love that kind of movie. So you probably definitely don't like a movie where John Wick just absolutely slaughters 50 men in the middle of traffic. In the middle of traffic. It's so good. So yeah, Grace Randolph is entitled to her opinion. I have no issue with that. David says, obviously no, they are not hacks, LOL. Oh, replying to another. Star Fury says, that reminds me, the Tokyo boss's daughter fighting style was much more realistic than most girl boss fights. Yeah, and, here's the thing. If you noticed, in John Wick 3, John Wick fights a giant. He fights a man who is literally like 7 to 8 feet tall. And in that fight, he's basically getting thrown around like a rag doll. And he still beats him, right? And so that, to me, makes sense, because he uses tactics that could beat someone that's that big, right? He can't beat him with brute force. He can't. The man's giant, right? Well, this is my point. This is how you should look at, women in action films. You just simply scale. What are they capable of versus what are they not? And John Wick was not capable of overpowering this man in John Wick in Chapter 3. He wasn't capable. So he had to find another way to beat him, and he did. Because every human being has weak spots. That's just a reality. So you have to fight smart. You have to fight with tactics. So I'm totally okay with it. Look, I love badass babes. I just think badass babes are awesome. I've always liked them since I was a kid, you know? So I got no issue with that. Just make it so that it's balanced and plausible. And look, if everyone is superhuman in the movie, then I don't mind superhuman women. I don't. I think that's totally fine. If the rules of the universe are women can do this in this universe, fine. Like Scarlett Johansson's uh, Black Widow. I always confuse her with Scarlet Witch. Black Widow, right? In Avengers, she does things that are pretty silly. But then so does Hawkeye. Hawkeye's able to like hit targets with his arrows while he's not looking. So I'm willing to accept a level of like, yeah, they can do these things. What I don't like is when they act as though the fact that Black Widow can do all these things in a fictional Avengers movie, that therefore that is inspiring to young women. It's like, but how? Like, I mean, sure, it's great to have women in prominent roles. That, yeah, I get that part, but like what these characters are doing isn't real. It's not, no human can do this, you know, so why is that inspiring? I find that logic stupid. I don't find it inspiring to say, wow, Captain America was able to hold a helicopter on a platform. That makes me feel good about being male. What? No, it doesn't. No man can do that. So now, Superman is inspiring because of his ideals, because of his heroism, and that's fair. That's fair to say. Yes, it's inspiring to have positive role models. But then, if that's the argument, how do you account for, like, Scarlet Witch? You know, that's probably a bit of a tangent. Star Fury says that... oh, yeah, I read that one. David says he's got that last action hero plot armor. You know, look, there's a certain level of that in every action movie, is what I would say. There's no action movie where you're not going to have a little bit of, oh, gee, if that one bad guy had just gotten a lucky shot, that would have ended the movie, right? On the other hand, I think that there's enough rules in the universe to make me able to overlook it. But I understand that argument. Sometimes he does have plot armor, but usually in John Wick, they justify things. And one thing I will say John Wick is good at is setup and payoff. John Wick is usually not wasting your time when it's setting something up, especially in this movie. And as I said, I kind of felt like in the first act, maybe they're wasting my time with these characters. And by the end of the film, it turned out they weren't. And it turned out there was a good payoff for all these different sort of subplots that they're weaving together in the beginning. And they definitely cashed in some of my patience in that first act. I will admit that. They cashed in my goodwill from the previous films, and I was like, all right, I'm willing to put up with a few more minutes of this, but I expect something in return. And I got it. So I'm happy. I'm happy. By the way, that's all I ask of Marvel. I watch Ant-Man, the first Ant-Man movie. It wasn't great, but I enjoyed it. There were some things about it that were fine. There were things about the original Captain America movie I didn't totally love, even though I love that movie. I'm willing to forgive a little bit of nonsense if the work is being done to earn my investment in the characters and in the story. And as long as it's not overtly wasting my time, I'm okay with imperfections in stories. And Quantum Mania is one of the biggest ways. I harp on this so much because it surprised me so much what a waste of time that movie is. Like, I didn't actually expect to hate it as much as I did. I didn't expect to like it by any means, but I didn't expect it to be as bad as Multiverse of Madness or Eternals or any of those others. I kind of thought this was going to be one of the okay ones, but I'd just be sort of bored. It's garbage. That movie is garbage, and it was insulting garbage. I was like, I'm insulted by this movie. Like the holes joke, oh my god. I'm insulted by the fact that you think I would want to sit here in a theater sober and watch all these absurd visual effects. I am insulted that you think that you thought that this would be worth my time. Like, Avatar: The Way of Water is 100% CGI, but it is worth my time. Now, you may disagree with me on that, but that is my personal feeling. Is like, Cameron is at least trying to create a world that's plausible in Avatar. If you say one thing for Cameron, at least what he's trying to do, whether you agree with me that he's successful or not, is he's trying to establish a world that has a real ecology with real creatures within the rules of this world that are plausible, that have a real evolutionary kind of backstory that's implied by their behavior, by the way they look, by the way they live in this world. And that is not a waste of my time. But the quantum realm, with all this nonsense about humans and single-celled organisms living together, and they're in this weird psychedelic universe, but there's also a bar. What? None of this makes any sense. It's awful. Star Fury says he made a deal, but clearly reneges on it by his actions. An excuse to have Scott Adkins in a fat suit. Yeah, I have to admit. Well, let me read your last comment, and I will reply to that. You should use a bridge background. I use one for work on Zoom call. Oh, yeah, like a Star Trek bridge. Oh, that might be too clever by half. I don't know. That's, I'm already dubbing myself a captain. One must not stretch the patience of the audience, But I would just say, on what you're saying about Scott Adkins in the fat suit, I can only assume you're referring to the guy in the poker scene in John Wick Chapter 4. There's a really big, burly guy that John Wick fights. There were a couple of moments in that fight that were unintentionally funny. I will admit. There were a couple of moments where I thought, those movies where Melissa McCarthy is like a superhero and she's clearly not capable of being a superhero, but they put her on wires and they have her doing absurd backflips, and that's where the comedy is coming from, is because she's doing these implausible backflips that are obviously on a wire. I kind of got that vibe a little bit from that scene. I'm sorry. I really did. I got that feeling of like, oh, this almost looks like a Melissa McCarthy kind of situation here. Not bad. It was just a couple of moments. It was like a couple of frames where I'm like, I don't know. That's a little silly. But the actor was so good. He kind of sold it anyway. So, it's a wash on that one. But the poker scene, that is good. Oh, you're talking about the movie Nobody. Okay, yeah. David says Nobody did a good job of making the fight scenes have consequences. The movie Nobody, starring Bob Odenkirk. Yes. If anyone has not seen that movie, Nobody. That's literally the title. And Bob Odenkirk plays this retired, I forget, was he an intelligence guy? I think he was like an intelligence wet work guy, if I remember correctly. It's been a couple of months since I saw it. Essentially a government hitman, more or less. But he's retired, and he winds up getting embroiled in, a dastardly plot. And there is this scene where he's fighting a bunch of hooligans on a bus. It's one of the coolest fight scenes I've ever seen in my life. Like, bar none. And here's why. Because it's a Jason Bourne style fight scene. Like a Liam Neeson in Taken style fight scene where he's a man with a certain set of skills. But the difference is it's how it would actually look if people were beating up on each other that way. That's the difference. The difference is when he takes a hit, you see damage, like going to the hospital kind of damage. And then when he does a hit, like he's knocking out teeth, he's opening up gashes that are going to need stitches. And you can see the fatigue also. You can see the pain that it's causing him to have to inflict these wounds. And then he himself is getting fatigued and disoriented because he's just from the exhaustion of the fight. Not even just the blows he's taking. The exhaustion of the fight is tiring him out. And he's getting sloppier, which is how real fights are, assuming you could, And so he's incredibly talented. He's got all the Jason Bourne moves, but instead it's portrayed but he's actually mortal. And it's so good. It is brutal. It's one of the most brutal fights I've ever seen in that style of that kind of like, oh, I'm a Liam Neeson, Jason Bourne kind of guy, but with the real consequences of that. So check that out. Fu Man Blue is in the chat. Hail Fu Man Blue. How are you? By the way, to everyone in the chat, everyone watching the stream, if you want to connect with me directly, I'm asking that there's a link to my locals in the chat. It's swordsandstarships.locals.com. And you can follow me for free. And I'm pretty sure I set it so that messages are free. You can direct message me for free. And I will keep that setting on unless Locals literally doesn't allow that. I will keep that setting intact because I want you to have a channel where you can get in touch with me directly. And I'm trying to build a community. There's not much going on there right now. I'm working on it. I want to get, and also I'm thinking of doing some gaming live streams and stuff like that. So, or at least posting the streams. I'll figure it out. But I'm working on some members only content. If you do choose to support me with a membership, which I would be incredibly grateful for, not expected or needed, but that is an option as well if you want to support the growth of the channel. But just follow me. Just give me a follow for free. It allows me to make sure that I always have a way to notify you of things. You know, YouTube is not the most free speech platform these days, so it kind of and that way I don't lose track. I don't lose track of you because I appreciate Fu Man Blue's been in the chat since the very first stream, and that means a lot. So give me a follow on Locals. That's really my main channel for connecting with you. And I'm also building a Discord, and that is also linked in the description, which is probably too much information. But yes, both of those links are down there. That link will expire in 7 days, but I'll update it on every stream. So if you want to join the Discord, that is also an option. And David says, "Hail Fu Man Blue," and I agree with David. Hail Fu Man Blue. David says, "Bus scene rules." Right up there with the hallway scene in Daredevil. The tracheotomy was a trip. Oh my God, I forgot about that. He does a tracheotomy. I won't tell you anymore. If you haven't seen Nobody with Bob Odenkirk of Better Call Saul fame, you must see it. You must see it. It's a great movie. And it's a great palate cleanser if you've been watching a bunch of Disney bilge. Yeah, what else? What else, dear friends? I have a story for you. I have a headline you might find of some interest. Shall we take a look? Shall we take a look? I will admit, you've probably heard this news, but it doesn't hurt just in case. Try this headline. Before that one, yes, this one. Victoria Alonso fires back against Disney and Marvel with potential legal action. The former executive producer is not going away quietly. So, of course, I'm sure everyone in this chat knows. Victoria Alonso, one of the number 2 over there at Marvel Studios, who is responsible for some of the most cringe red carpet interview takes. She was the one that had the genius idea that, maybe X-Men is a bit of an outdated title because there's also women in the X-Men. And so we should call them the mutants or whatever dumb crap. She was also the one that corrected the pronunciation of Namor to Namor. It's Namor. She also had the genius idea of literally openly and in public completely chastising her own employer, Disney, for not getting involved in the Parental Rights and Education Act issue in Florida. And basically put them in the political hot seat, forcing poor hapless Bob Chapek. Poor hapless Bob Chapek, who just wanted to do the right thing. Getting involved in the internal affairs of a state in which he had no business getting involved in. And now Disney has lost its tax status for Disney World and is losing billions of dollars. And every single Marvel movie is failing. This would be her. And she has been fired by Marvel, and she's not going quietly. Now, why do I find this headline interesting? Because obviously, someone like this with this kind of narcissistic ego, she ain't going quietly. But here's the thing. There was a minute there, for just a minute, we were thinking maybe this wasn't her getting fired. Maybe this was, well, I should rephrase that. We knew that she was getting fired. What we were thinking was Disney would try and pull that old line of oh no, it was a mutual decision. She, time with her family. She's going to focus on other things, etc. Trying to hide the fact that shit has hit the fan over there at Marvel and its heads are starting to roll. But of course, corporations, they live in absolute fear of embarrassment. And so they always try to hide the truth. But in this case, there's no bones about it. If she's talking about a lawsuit, then that means she was fired. She was fired, friends. There is no doubt about that. The Victoria Alonso situation is playing out exactly as I said. As it's learned, the former Marvel exec is weighing legal action against Disney and Marvel over her sudden firing. This from Matt McGloin of Comic Book News. Last Monday saw it announced that Victoria Alonso was no longer with Marvel after 17 years, with it learned she had been fired. It has, that must be very painful to spend all that time. You fired the fans, Miss Alonso. You fired them, and now you've been fired. So, turnabout is fair play. It has been further reported that Alonso clashed with the heads of Marvel, Kevin Feige and Louis D'Esposito, and that, in part, her firing was due to the problems at Marvel with the VFX artists and studios. The failure of Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, and I said her woke politics are also to blame. So, I don't think it's her woke politics that got her fired. Obviously, now running her mouth in public about her woke politics might get her fired, because here's the deal. If you have ever worked in the corporate world, you cannot go around running your mouth in public about things that are deliberately attempting to shame your own company. This is the absolute arrogance and insanity of entertainment executives. Like, only in the world of entertainment and Hollywood could anyone get so entitled and so arrogant and so up their own asshole as to think they could do this. Like, it wouldn't matter if she was upset about them, not getting involved in the parental rights bill. If she really cared about it, if she really was that upset, the proper way to deal with that is to go up her chain of command and raise the issue and say, you need to do something about that, which tells me that had nothing to do with it. She wanted virtue signal points. She wanted clout, and she thought she was untouchable. She thought she could go out there and call her own company out on the carpet, and they couldn't do anything about it. And she fucked around and she found out, didn't she? But in no other corporation could anyone but a lunatic even consider such a course of action, because they would be immediately fired. Imagine if some dimwit at Pfizer went around spilling the beans about, what they're really researching. Oh, wait, no, we have seen things like that happen, and we know what happens to them. So, getting back to the article, I also said to look for the narrative to play out that Victoria Alonso would be billed as the hero of the LGBTQ community who stood up to Disney and Marvel and got fired for that, which, in her world, her plan was to be exactly this first half of it. She was going to be the hero of the LGBTQ community who forced Disney and Marvel to get with the program and get woke and do the right thing and fight injustice. That was the narrative she thought she was going to get, and she didn't get that. Deadline reports Victoria Alonso is making it clear to Bob Iger, Kevin Feige, and everyone at the House of Mouse that she is not going quietly, as Alonso has retained the services of Patty Glasser of Glasser, Weil, Fink, Howard, Avchin, and Shapiro LLP, who released the following. I want to read that again. The services of Patty Glasser of Glasser, Weil, Fink, Howard, Avchin, and Shapiro LLP. Call Glasser, Weil, Fink, Howard, Avchin, Shapiro LLP for all of your slip and fall claims. Have you been injured in an auto accident? Do you have a settlement due? Call the firm of Glasser, Weil, Fink, Howard, Avchin, Shapiro LLP. See, that's a hard one, I think. And this is the statement that her legal team released. The idea that Victoria was fired over a handful of press interviews relating to a personal passion project about human rights and democracy that was nominated for an Oscar and which she got Disney's blessing to work on is absolutely ridiculous. Victoria, a gay Latina who is so gay, who had the courage, the stunning and brave courage to criticize Disney, was silenced. And then she was terminated when she refused to do something she believed was reprehensible. Does it not stun you, the moral virtue of these people? Does it not just shame you, the absolute moral perfection? They who are perfectly happy to be silent when Disney quietly censors the images of their black characters on the posters so that China will be okay with it. They who carefully remove any references to the LGBT community from any movies that they have to release in, say, the Middle East. I am humbled by the moral virtue of these people. Resuming with the quote, Disney and Marvel made a really poor decision that will have serious consequences. There is a lot more to this story, and Victoria will be telling it shortly in one form or another. I'll blow your house down. A spokesman for Disney also told Deadline, which reveals additional details behind her firing, it's unfortunate. Oh, God, don't you just love corporate speak? By the way, this is how all of corporate America is. All of it. It's all like this. It's why I hate it. It's why I want out of it. It's unfortunate that Victoria is sharing a narrative that leaves out several key factors concerning her departure, including an indisputable breach of contract and a direct violation of company policy. And we will continue to wish her the best for her future and thank her for her numerous contributions to the studio. Oh, yes. You mean that giant turd called Ant-Man Quantumania that lost you money? You mean the Mandalorian that's like sinking? I mean, I know she's on Marvel, but she's you know that Disney World that's now no longer benefiting from all those sweetheart tax benefits that no other amusement park got? Yeah, I would thank her for those contributions as well. And well, you should, our friends at Disney. Yes. Don't we just love to see it? Don't we just, this is the politics of the corporate world right here. This is lying for a living. This is obfuscating the truth for a living. This is what they do. Well, we wish her the best. We wish her the very best, and we're disappointed. We're very disappointed. God, it's just, you have to lie. You have to be a liar to be in corporate America. It's like, look, no offense. I have worked my way in corporate America, and I'm not even saying there aren't reasons to like put a brave face on things, but I'm probably just, look, we all have to be loyal to the company we work for. If you work at Walmart, you can't go around talking about problems with Walmart publicly. But it just ain't no way to live if you can get out of it. So, not all of us can. There's other ways to make money. That's all I'm saying. I encourage people who have a hard time living in that environment to work forward. So, what do we have here? Did we? Eric Mars said Gilded is proving to be better than Discord. Good that you are there too. I'm a little bit of a neophyte on those platforms. I'm kind of new to them. I'm used to Discord because I've used it for other things, and so I don't know. I will think about Gilded as well. Let me know in the chat if there's more interest in Gilded, then maybe I'll do that instead, because there's not much happening on the Discord just yet because we're just getting it rolling. So maybe Gilded is a better way to go. David says, sorry, my bad on the spoiler. What was the spoiler? Well, don't repeat it. Oh my God. Gotta bounce, y'all. Lovely chatting with everyone. Well, thank you, David. Thanks for coming in. And permission to disembark granted. Erigmar says, she is grade A woke hack. And have a great evening. Well, thank you, Erigmar, also known as Black Knight. Check out his book on Amazon. Thank you for joining. I appreciate it. King Tiberius, never talk about your bosses in the public space. Yes, I'm probably being... Look, I should dial back the hyperbole. There are plenty of ethical corporate environments, right? There are plenty of ethical businesses. And there are ethical reasons for not running your mouth about things, because part of it is you are on a team, and the team has to have an official story that aligns, because a team is made up of individuals, and individuals are bound to disagree from time to time. So there needs to be a way to work that out internally and then decide, okay, and we're putting forth what into the world. You can't have mixed messages. But it is certainly true that there's plenty of corporations that are just engage in lying pathologically. And to the extent that I've worked in the corporate world, it has been for companies I considered ethical, and that I considered, as ethical as possible. And yet, it just is taxing to constantly have to go through that And I'm not even blaming the companies. It's just the reality of business to some extent. I mean, at some point, Swords and Starships becomes a large employer with hundreds of employees and production budgets and everything. Yes, there will have to be a company line. There will have to be. But there will also be an effort to be as transparent and as authentic at all times as possible. And I think you can do that without, but you cannot have employees that are going around just, calling you out because it's not appropriate. There's a chain of command. Here's a good example for my Star Trek fans, Star Trek aficionados. What happens when there's a disagreement between the captain and the first officer? First officer, in Star Trek anyway, is allowed to raise their concern kind of one time. You're kind of able to say, Captain, I'm concerned this is the wrong course of action. The captain said, well, number one, your concerns are noted. Carry out my orders. And that's fine. But if the first officer then says, Captain, this is ridiculous. You're going to get us all killed. This is a terrible idea. Then it's like, report to my effing quarters right now, or report to my ready room right effing now. And then it's like, now we got to have a conversation because and really what the first officer should have done is said, Captain, may I see you in your ready room? And then it's like, permission to speak freely. This is a bad idea. You're going to get us all killed. That's fine. And that's the problem with Alonso, is that she, at least if we're taking what she said at face value, she had a bone to pick with her leadership, and she decided to pick that bone in public and try to get an award for it. So, bad move. Bad move, Alonso. And Erigmar says, yes, we know what happens, LOL. This is so funny. They use old school communist speak. Yes, I can. Well, they use the doublespeak, right? They use the Orwellian doublespeak. What else? What else on this ship of entertainment must we explore? I'm going to circle back to John Wick for just one thing, because I missed one thing that I found kind of interesting here. And it kind of ties together my whole point. So, maybe we'll just kind of wrap it up with this. This kind of ties together my whole point about storytelling and commitment to storytelling versus this kind of corporate mentality of just strangling the golden goose. So I just kind of happened across this headline, and it's nothing particularly dramatic, but I found it interesting because the director of John Wick basically said, here the headline goes, I don't know how to do it. Director rejected studio's offer for John Wick Chapter 5 despite Keanu Reeves' success in $600 million franchise. This from Fandom Wire. Chad Stahelski's contribution to the John Wick franchise. Chad Stahelski is well known for making the John Wick franchise a success. Stahelski. I think that's how you say it. Stahelski has successfully directed all 4 installments of the series, and the director Cum Stuntman's contributions to the success of the super hit franchise cannot be overstated. As the director of the first John Wick movie, he was instrumental in crafting the unique style and aesthetic of the series. But what's interesting is Mr. Stahelski turned down John Wick Chapter 5. In an interview, he revealed that he was offered the opportunity for Chapter 5, but he declined it. God, to be honest with you, I don't know. Not to cause any weird clickbait or anything like that, which is exactly what he wound up causing, the studio first came to us and went, look, we would like to explore the option of doing 4 and 5 together, and the dauntingness of that at first is a little intimidating. But it's also incredibly flattering. In an industry where everyone's trying to get something made and you're trying to get your wacky ideas made and somebody to listen and give them a shot, to have people come up to you and go, please make more of what you do. I can't thank Lionsgate enough for even presenting that opportunity. The director went on to say, I've been part of projects that have done 2 films together at once, and for me, I don't know how to do it. So basically what they wanted him to do is film 4 and 5 together as one, the way that, just the way that Peter Jackson did Lord of the Rings, all, kind of just filmed them all in a row. So they're kind of saying, let's do that with John Wick. And he said no. And what he said was, creatively, I don't know how to get my head around that. I think the greatest part is that after each John Wick, I took 2 years off to live and get better, to travel, to read more, and to get better. I don't know how to do a movie back to back and get better for the second one. You'd see John Wick 4 and then John Wick 4B, right? Same camera, same colors, same action, same style of choreography, and same storylines. I had no time to be influenced by life and to bring life back in it. So I just thought it was a kind of a cheat. I have great respect for this director for recognizing this because he's essentially being offered, a full dump truck load of money and a huge opportunity to just do kind of whatever he wants, and he can film 4 and 5, and the freedom that gives you to just really go huge with the story. But he's recognizing that, like, no, part of what gives these films their shape is the life that I'm living in between the films. And I think that is a super important thing to know about oneself as an artist. And this is one of the reasons why the MCU and DC and all these other, it's Disney, Star Wars, this is why they're floundering. Because all they can see is the dollars and cents. All they can see is, we'll film them both together. We can release them in this timeline. We can make this many billions. How many billions? How many billions will we make if we do both at the same time? And that's the only way they look at it. But this guy, and this guy, if he were a little more self-serving, would say, well, it is a lot of money, and it will allow me to recognize exactly. Imagine Taika Waititi getting this offer. He could never turn that down, ever. I mean, I think he would be like, yeah, I'll do 3. You want me to do 3? I'll do 3. This guy has the self-restraint. And I'm only saying this guy because it's for whatever reason, it's killing me to pronounce this guy's name. Stahelski. I think it's Stahelski. The reason that Chad Stahelski, is so wise to do this is that he understands that if he's not disciplined in how he approaches his craft, he's going to start diluting it and he's going to start watering it down. And that is exactly a serious danger that John Wick is always at risk of, because with John Wick, there is that risk of the action scenes getting to be repetitive and getting to be too formulaic. And so by giving himself that break, he is disciplining himself to make sure that life comes in and recharges the creativity and gives him a new way of looking at things. And I can only credit that level of discipline and artistic work ethic to why John Wick 4 is such a great film. And why they're able to keep upping the ante with these. I don't even know how they do it. I don't know how they come up with a new way of showing John Wick be epic and amazing, and really just like 6 new ways in this movie, which is freaking awesome. So I think that's a great standout example of a director, a creative who has discipline and self-awareness. And that discipline and self-awareness is what is lost in the MCU right now. It is why, if you go to these films and you're like, what is wrong? Why are these films not as good as they used to be? It's like, because they're stuffed with a bunch of creatives that have none of this. They have none of this perspective. So, hat tip to Mr. Chad Stahelski for being a great creative. I salute you, sir. The captain salutes you. Alrighty, chat. Well, we have been on an epic journey together. We have streamed for a good long while, and it is time to say farewell. So, I am Captain Garrett of the channel Swords and Starships. I do thank you for coming in and chatting with me for a while about all these things of which I have so much passion. And if you would like to help out the channel, please do like and subscribe, share the stream, share the videos. It drags down the algorithm a little bit to do long streams, but I enjoy doing long streams and I enjoy spending time with you, so I'm willing to risk it. But if you want to help out, please do like and subscribe. Let your friends know who you think might enjoy the channel, and let me know what you think would make it better. And as always, of course, I have put the link to the locals. Give me a follow, swordsandstarships.locals.com, so that I can keep this direct relationship with you. And keep building this fellowship. And Tom says, thanks, Captain. Salute. Well, I salute you too, Tom. And thank you for joining me this evening. And so I say, until next time, dear sailors and starnauts, I will see you